Oh, so. Who's winning? Who's winning?
It finally worked. Restart Wirecast.
Is that Formula One? Is that Formula One?
Like Hamilton, Bell, second, both cars. Bell is coming in, he's going one at a time. You know, it's that. Ronnie, and then the red goes third place, everybody else is out there, you know, filling. Yeah, that's it, everybody.
So he's going to explicitly call it the reader's card. There is a section of text after that, and then he'll say, I now invite the cases to be given and the words to be shared, and that's when the readers start reading.
Thank you so much for checking out.
Got that too?
And you know what I think they ought to do? Is switch the drivers around. Because it's a damn car, man. I mean, if you got the best car, you're going to be the best driver. Because all those guys are good.
That's right.
Yeah, they just got bad equipment.
Got slightly better engine.
Yeah, I mean,
Better tire.
and you know, about 3 or 4 teams that run Mercedes engines, you know Mercedes ain't gonna give you the same thing they run it. I mean, come on, man.
More out of engine.
Yeah.
Summer, we're not doing the music during the meditation. We're doing music meditation, then ring the gong, let's go down. Meditation and silence, ring the gong, let's go again. We're making it simpler.
I read the script.
Good. Good.
And I noticed that like, we were making slides that not the script.
Yikes.
Because they had words that said, there were more words. So I removed the more words.
Thank you. I guess I haven't told Tony specifically that either, but yeah. We just change the, it's just easier to like guest ministers and like, yeah, put out all the info.
Good morning. Yes, okay.
Then I'll bring it to you after. But it,
I was just going to start at the beginning. Is
well,
that
it
not the right
has a
spot?
whole bunch of stuff at the beginning, and it really runs longer than an hour. So I looked at it and I got the time that she starts the introduction to the speaker started.
We'll just find you a good afternoon, grab you right after the service. Not
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta. So glad you're here in this summertime service. We're very lucky to have Mr. Rhett Baird in our pulpit this morning. Rhett told me that he became a member of UUCA in 1962, which is the last time we were in temporary space, right? We were in temporary space in 1962. We bought that property in 1961, moved in 65, or somewhere there. So how exciting. So we're very, very glad to have Rhett here with us this morning. Our first hymn is number 134 in the gray hymnal, Our World is One World. Please rise in body or in spirit. Our world is one world. What touches one affects us all. The seas that wash us round about, the clouds that cover us, the rains that fall. Our world is one world. The thoughts we think affect us all. The way we build our attitudes with love or hate we make, a bridge or wall. Our world is one world. Its ways of wealth affect us all. The way we spend, the way we share, who are the rich or poor, who stand or fall. Our world is one world, just like a ship that bears us all, where fear and greed make many holes, but where our hearts can hear a different call. So happy you are here. It is the best place to be in Atlanta, Georgia on a Sunday morning.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta, a beloved community that is changing lives. I'm Bill Kramer, and I'm so glad you're here with us today. Wherever you are from and whomever you love, you are welcome. If this is your first time, or if you've not yet had a chance, please stop by our Welcome Center in the social hall and after the service to allow us to get to know you better. You can sign up to receive information about services and programs being presented over the next several weeks. It's summertime, and for children's religious education, that means cool workshops the congregants are leading. For more information, please check your order of service, and you can also talk to one of the hosts at the RE table in the social hall. And after our service at 11:30, we offer religious education classes for adults. And once again, please take a look in your order of service. I especially want to highlight our Inquirers class, which is great for people wanting to learn more about our faith community. It meets in room 1, just outside the social hall. Some of our fellow congregants are in Spokane, Washington, attending the UU General Assembly, and you can get a taste of what the GA offers by coming to the sanctuary at 11:30 to watch the video of the Where lecture from GA 2018. The speaker was Brittany Packnett, speaking on dismantling white supremacy. Since 1922, except for 1945 and 1950, the lecture has been given annually at the yearly meeting of the AUA and then the General Assembly of the UUA. Please join us in the sanctuary at 11:30 to watch last year's Where lecture together. And now, please take a moment to put your cell phone in its most reverent position. Thank you. And once again, we are very glad you are here with us today. Our call to worship comes from the Reverend Eric Walker Wickstrom. We come together this morning because within us there is something that knows We need more than we can find in our aloneness. We know instinctively in the depths of ourselves that we need others for this journey of life, even though we also guard our independence and individuality quite jealously. So let us celebrate all that makes us unique, yet also all that makes us one. And let us dream dreams of all that we can do together.
Invite my dear friend Kiana McLeod, who's here this morning, singing some opera for us. This is one of the most fantastic arrangements of the song Deep River.
As Dawn lights our chalice, may its flame be a beacon to those who seek the warmth of community, the security of togetherness, and the peace of belonging. Please join me in saying the chalice lighting words. Your order of service are on the screens. May the light of this flame illuminate our tradition of seeking, invite all who yearn for acceptance, and ignite our passion for justice and peace. May we extend this light, this beacon, to one another by greeting our neighbor, friend, or stranger.
Yeah, good to see you.
sorry. The order was wrong in this.
Our reading today, The Task of the Religious Community by the Reverend Mark Morrison Reed. The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is the church that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens and our strength is renewed.
Our music for meditation is in 4 parts. So let's call part 1 like kind of over here, right? So everybody over here. Your part goes, where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Great, and once you sing it once, you're going to sing it for like 15 minutes. And then kind of right in here, your second part, your part goes, where do we come from? Where do we come from? Part 3, kind of in here, you get the fun part. Your part goes, mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery, mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Good pocket of choir members right here, it's great. And then part 4 we have over here, your part goes, where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? So we'll just kind of add on over and over. Then when I give the stop sign, universal stop sign, we're all going to sing part 3. We're going to sing the mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery together. Good rehearsal. Let's do this. And where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery, mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery.
Let us put hands on hearts, feel the warm connection. Let love in this moment flow. Say to yourself silently, I will love myself. I will love others, and that love will heal the world. And now the joys and sorrows of our beloved community. We keep Kay Golan and her nieces and nephews in our hearts. Kay's brother-in-law passed away on June 16th and will be greatly missed. Cards and emails are welcome. We hold Julie Pierce in our hearts. Julie's Aunt Betty died this week. Julie says Aunt Betty was a fierce force of nature, defending those who could not defend themselves. Also, cards and emails welcome. A memorial service for Olivia Kappas will be held on Sunday, July 14th at 2 p.m. Jean Woodall is collecting memories or recollections prior to the service, and you can send those to her at 3bluebirdsandme@gmail.com. We turn our thoughts to the wider world and pray for peace in the Middle East and a diplomatic resolution to the escalating tensions with Iran. May decision makers use caution in resolving these differences. We send love and prayers to families impacted by our current immigration policies and practices. We need not look alike or speak alike to love alike. At this time, I invite you to say out loud the names of people you are holding in your heart this morning. Let silence be our sanctuary now. We take in a big breath, and then we exhale. We gently surrender to something larger than ourselves. We enter into the wise silence. Our call to the offering comes from John Saxon. A religious community is like a river formed from the many streams of our lives that meet and merge and flow to the sea. As members and friends of this religious community, we share our time and energy, our creativity, imagination, and vision, our talents, skills, and gifts, and the streams of our individual lives to create a river that is both deep and broad. A river that is made of many streams, sustains life, and refreshes the land through which it flows. But this river of this community also depends on our shared financial support that makes real our shared values and vision. You are invited to give generously and joyfully as you are willing and able. The offering will now be given and gratefully received. streams, but one river. We are grateful for all that we contribute to this beautiful religious community. We're grateful for friends who sing. Thank you for your generosity today. We bless these resources. May they go far in our work together. Please join me in dedicating this offering to the words on the screen or your program. To the word of this congregation, which is created a tapestry of love and action, we call community. We dedicate our lives and these our offerings.
Glimpses of the holy and shreds of the sacred. Indeed. I have a friend. He's incarcerated in federal prison, half a continent away, serving 5 years. We communicate regularly by special email through the Department of Corrections. I told him last week the title of my remarks for this morning. I got a response back Thursday, and I want to read that to you. He said, "I love that phrase, glimpses of the holy and shreds of the sacred. That is what I continue to be graced with here. Each day I spend an hour in a Rosetta Stone course continuing my Spanish lessons. I sit next to an Hispanic inmate who is using a Rosetta Stone course to learn English, about the same level that I am learning Spanish. I'm responding to the computer program, and it is inevitable that I overhear his attempts at English as he must hear my attempts to speak Spanish." And then he says this: "There seems to be an invisible bridge between us being built for that hour of each day as we both struggle to learn the language of the other. And all the learning the language can open up for both of us, a kind of childhood parallel play, perhaps, which helps each of us grow." My friend is one of over 1,200,000 men and women and juveniles who are incarcerated in our prisons, our jails, our juvenile detention centers. And every time I write my friend, I am reminded of the first of our purposes and principles: the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and that includes my friend and all of his colleagues who are incarcerated. Several years ago, one of my colleagues, Reverend Morrison Reed, came to preach here. Just before the sermon started, I rushed down and I whispered in his ear. And I told him, I said, "Your one reading in our gray hymnal is the most important reading in the whole book. And the first line of your one reading is the most important line in the whole 300-page book." He started crying. I started crying. And we hugged. And Reverend McCarr, he was standing somewhere nearby. He thought I was stepping on his guest minister's foot or something because his guest minister was crying, so he came rushing up to see what was going on. But I think really what was going on and the reason we cried is because we both knew that that first line was probably the only sermon that either one of us had, and that all of our other sermons and our whole lives were variations on a theme. That is the primary task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to the other. We didn't discuss our thoughts on how do you do that? Well, my answer to that, and of course that must be answered if you're going to, if that sentence is so important it's going to be lived out, you've got to have some answers to how you're going to do that. And I'm here this morning to tell you that my opinion is that one of the answers is by the sharing of stories. The sharing of stories that give us some indication of who we are. And only by the sharing of stories can we unveil those bonds. We can't discover the bonds if we don't share the stories. Here's a fine musician here. I know he's a musician, but that's not enough. We need to share stories if we're going to really get to know each other. If we're going to unveil the bonds that bind him to me, then we have to share something about ourselves. Not just the fact that he's a musician or that she marches in marches that are important to her in a social justice cause, but we have to share stories that are real, that make us vulnerable, and it's only then that we get real honest with each other. And only then can we unveil those bonds. I want to tell you a few stories this morning out of my long journey in ministry that have shaped who I am, and stories that I will only hint at. And the phrase shreds of the sacred have to do with my memory. I'm going on 79 years old, and I don't guarantee anything. I don't even guarantee that everything I tell you will be true. But I will tell you that I used to be, some of you know this, I used to be a country circuit riding lay Unitarian Universalist preacher. For 13 years, I served 5 little Universalist churches in 3 states. And I was gone every weekend. And Nancy Bartley would often go with me and play her guitar. And Michelle and Anne-Marie, two of my 3 daughters, would often go and play their flute and clarinet. And there's a famous line of a Universalist preacher of 100 years ago. He wrote a book called My 47 Years in the Ministry. And he talked about riding his horse, like from Newberry, South Carolina to Winder, Georgia. Sometimes in a storm, in the rain, and the congregation may have to wait a long time because he may be delayed in his horse. But when he climbed up into the pulpit, he had a famous saying. He said, "I've come a long way, and I'm going to preach for a long time." And so you laugh, but you know, if I'm a part of him, no telling how long this gathering is going to last. So you better just be prepared. I know there are children in there in their religious education program. If this runs over, they'll just have to come in here, and we'll see what happens. When I first went to the first of the little country churches, I was terrified. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what they were going to expect. Anyway, I began my sermon with my dry mouth and being frightened. And about 5 minutes into my sermon, I noticed out of the corner of my eye there was an elderly lady sitting on the front row, and she was nodding in agreement with me. I was so thrilled. It gave me a sense of confidence. And I galloped on for another 10 minutes. And then I noticed she was still nodding. And then it suddenly occurred to me that she was not nodding in agreement with me. She was nodding because she had an affliction. But it gave me such a boost of confidence that it didn't matter that it was real or not. I continued on, And she taught me how fragile our feelings and egos are sometimes, and I was able to laugh at myself in my own frailties. And that was fine until, I began to see this was these little churches had no air conditioning. The windows had to be open, the doors had to be open. Bees and wasps would come and bang themselves up against the ceiling. I'm not sure why. One day, I was in the middle of my sermon, and a neighborhood dog came walking in. And he sat down. I could only believe that my reputation as a preacher had spread throughout the neighborhood. And he had come to hear this new minister. And that was just fine, and I loved that. And I appreciated his coming. But then out of the corner of my eye, this time, not the old lady, but the dog, he yawned. He yawned, and then he got up and walked out. Right in the middle of my sermon. Hurt my feelings, he did. But he also taught me a lesson. The world doesn't revolve around me. That was a pretty good lesson from a dog. Many of you will remember Reverend Martha Griffith. She was my internship supervisor here when I did my internship in this congregation in 1992. She was a dear friend. She was a fine and honorable minister. And I could not stand before you today without lifting up some words of hers. Reverend Griffith, for those you don't know, you may not know her, she was the associate minister here in 1992. I invited her to do the ordination sermon when this congregation ordained me. The title of her sermon was, "I've come a long way and I'm going to preach a long time." And I think she scared the hell out of everybody there. Because it was about a three-hour sermon. I don't know. 3 months after delivering that sermon, she was in New Orleans on vacation with a friend, the minister in New Orleans, and she was diagnosed with lymphoma. And 9 months later, she was dead at age 39. She was hospitalized in New Orleans. That congregation and her friend took care of her. She kept a diary, a journal. And I want to read to you just a couple of lines. And these lines were actually published in the UUCA newsletter in May of 1994, about a month after Reverend Griffith died. And these are her words, written on December the 15th, 1993. "I'm determined to go on a walking tour of the French Quarter tonight. I'll take my cane. I'll crawl if I have to. I need to see some sparkle and beauty of Christmas." And on February the 4th, 94, she wrote, "Bare winter tree branches catch the gaudy Mardi Gras beads missed by the crowd's hands. They hang there now, colorful and rain-soaked, where they will hang for years, a testament to the human need to play in the midst of winter, a testament to the transience of things, of joy and sorrow." And her last entry on February the 16th, 94. "My faith, Unitarian Universalism, is no fair weather faith. Ask me. I've tested it. I know." She died in April of that year. She taught me about dying with dignity, with grace, and the courage to accept the inevitable. I miss her still. When I was ordained here, I shortly after that was called to a congregation in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And at one point in my ministry there, I went to visit about a dozen Unitarian Universalists who lived in a life care facility. I took with me a book of short stories, and I invited them to read a common short story and come back the following week with a one-page, not a summary of the story, but a written recollection of your engagement with the story as you read it. They came. They came back the following week. They came in their wheelchairs. They came with their hearing aids. They came with their trimmers. They came with their knowledge that death was not too far away. They were eager to share. And they shared not a summary of the story, but their engagement with it, which meant that they were sharing parts of themselves. They were using that short story to offer a glimpse into their soul to their friends who were sitting around the table. And this was no intellectual gathering. When each person finished their sharing, their one-page sharing, the group said, "Thank you." And we moved on to the next one. And as I watched all of that unfold, I realized how important it is that we tell stories to each other, that we allow others to glimpse who we are. I've often used the imagery of a prism. You know, we know each other only through what the person has told us and what we've observed. And it's almost like when we stand and we look at a prism, we see parts of the rainbow. And the person over there may see a different sequence of colors because of where they're standing. And it's similar with us. People know us by the stories that we tell. And everybody in this room knows some people here, but you know them only through the prism of the stories that they have shared with you. And so really my hope today is that my words can somehow invite and motivate you to find new ways to share with each other, to find new ways to share with people you have not yet met and you don't yet know in this community. So that's my mission this morning, is to invite all of that to come about. For 6 months, I was a chaplain in the neuropsychiatric unit of the geriatric hospital at Wesley Woods, part of Emory. You know, this was a 30-day diagnostic facility trying to figure out how to best help folks who had various forms of dementia and Alzheimer's. And to send a Unitarian Universalist into that setting was the best thing they could have done. Absolutely, because all the labels of I'm a Jew, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Unitarian Universalist, I'm a Presbyterian, all of that stuff drops to the wayside at the door, okay? Many of these people, number one, didn't know even where they were or where their families were, but they all had deep human yearnings that were very much the same. And I had to figure out how to do ministry with them. One of the things we did, every time we gathered for worship, I would bring some object that would stimulate, hopefully, one of the five senses. I might bring a seashell. And if you can picture a 90-year-old lady listening to a seashell with a group gathered around her, you know what happens next? She starts telling what? A story about walking on the beach with her mama. Okay? All because of a seashell. She honors the gathering by telling her story, and the group honors her by listening to her story. They had not heard that story before, but it was called forth by a seashell and a preacher who was desperate, who didn't know what else to do. You sure couldn't go in there with a Bible, I'll tell you that. Again, stories. You hear what I'm saying? Stories. When I was a minister in Macon, I was on the executive committee of the NAACP. We gathered in a neighborhood one Saturday morning just to go house to house in teams of two. Just hello, how are you? Meet your neighbor, meet and greet, encourage you to do something nice for your neighbor before the sun goes down that day. That's all it was. So we knocked on the first door. A grandmother was raising two teenage boys. And as we left, she said, now the lady next door, she can't hear and she can't speak. And so my buddy and I, we decided that it would be the best thing to do is kind of skip over that house. We didn't know what to do. And so we're halfway passing her home. And we hear behind us this noise, grrr, grrr. And we turned around, and it was the lady who lived there. She couldn't speak, but she could sure growl. And we turned around. We went into her home. The first thing she did, she went and got an order of service from her husband's funeral that was held just 2 months ago. And she made a universal sign of some kind to let us know that her heart was broken. And I spoke it. I said, your heart is broken. And she nodded. And then she went and got a certificate where she had been honored for working for the last 20 years at the Okmulgee Indian Mounds in Macon. And then she took us to a painting around the corner in her home. And it was a painting. It was a field of ripe cotton. And there was a black woman picking cotton. And I don't know how she did it, but she, with her, I guess, motions, she was telling us a story. And the story was that she, as a little girl, used to pick cotton. And so we would mime what she was telling, and she would, yes, that's it. She would pick the cotton. She would put it into the bag, and we'd have a bag right there. And then she'd pull it down the row. And that's how she told us the story. And my friend and I, when we left, we went back to the car. We couldn't go in any other houses right then. We went back to the car and cried. She taught us, or the message she sent was, don't pass me by. Don't pass me by just because I'm different. Don't pass me by just because you're afraid to be near differentness. That's a powerful learning for a young preacher. I pass that along to you, too. There was a woman in Atlanta who contacted me she had been assaulted and robbed downtown near a MARTA station. The fellow was caught and arrested, and he was in prison. And she wanted to forgive him, and she wanted me to help her. Wanted me to see what I could do to be helpful to him. And so I wrote to him, and I asked if he would be interested in being friends. And he wrote me back, and he said he would be honored to be friends, and he would try his very best to do that. He said he hadn't had any visits in the 21 months he'd been there, and that he would welcome a visit especially. And then he said, I'm in the mental health unit. I'm schizophrenic. I'm not harmful. I'm just not very trustful of people. And I'm not able to think about the future very much. He said, I've been in and out of foster homes all of my life, and I would welcome your friendship. Well, I went to see him. He was frightened when I told him that the woman that he assaulted had sent me to befriend him. He thought I had come to harm him. He couldn't believe that someone who had been assaulted would send someone to befriend him. And we sat in a gymnasium, locked in with other inmates and their families and visitors, 25 or 30 of them. The sign on the wall. You know what the sign says? The sign says, no hugging except at the beginning and the end. In the middle of his letter to me, he said, please accept me as I am. I'll never forget it. Please accept me as I am. I'm going to tell you one more. I was a chaplain at Grady Hospital. About 11 o'clock one night, I was walking in a fairly dark corridor in Grady, ready to go home, tired, preoccupied. And I heard a voice. And the voice said, Chaplain, are you saved? Well, I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know what to do with that. But, I was trying to do right, and so I followed the voice into the darkness, and I sat down and tried to begin having a theological conversation, for God's sake, with her. As I look back on it now, I said, my God, I must have been crazy. But anyway, that's what I tried to do. And I could tell I was failing to communicate and connect. Her eyes glazed over, and soon she said, I got to go. And she left. The next morning, I was telling my supervisor about the incident, and she listened carefully. And then she smiled. And then she laughed at me. And then she said, Rhett, didn't you know she was just trying to connect with you? No, it never occurred to me. It never occurred to me she was just trying to connect with me. She left in the darkness. I never knew her name. I never knew why she was sitting there in the darkness. But all I knew is I didn't connect. I've often thought of her over the years, and I've decided that if I had a chance to do it again, and I heard that voice in the darkness, and somebody says, "Chaplain, are you saved?" I've got an answer for her this time. And my answer this time would be, "Yes, ma'am, I am. And how is it with you today?" And then guess what? She would tell me a story, right, of why she was there. She didn't really want an answer to that question. She really wanted to connect with another human being. And I learned from that as well. So I hope that if in this community or anywhere else somebody says to you, "Brother, are you saved?" I hope you'll say, what? "Yes, sir, I am." Absolutely. And then you say, "How is it with you today?" And I'll guarantee you, you'll get a story. Okay. Now, we want to move now into the final portion of my sermon that's not printed in your sermon. But at this point in the service, I'd like to ask the volunteer readers to come forward and prepare to participate. And I would invite the ushers to prepare to distribute the gift of a scroll that I have prepared and brought for each of you. So the scroll that's going to be given out is sort of a reverse offertory. So you're not asked to put something in, you're asked to take something out. Okay, but don't open it. Take it out. Each scroll is a copy of one of 60 different pastors' columns that were published, that I wrote and were published in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, the state newspaper in Arkansas, and the Macon Telegraph, and maybe one or two other newspapers. And it's my hope that you'll take this gift home. Don't even open it now. It's more important that you be present with each other while we have the opportunity this morning and during the coffee hour to be present with each other, not reading a scroll. But take it home with you, and if you're so inclined, read it. And if you're further inclined, bring it back sometime, maybe next week, and seek out somebody in this community that you don't know very well, or that you would like to get to know better, maybe a total stranger, and approach them and use this scroll, use this column and your response to it as an opportunity, as a bridge to tell that person about what you've read. And maybe they'll tell you about one they've read. There's 60 different columns, so this could be a year-long project. You could trade these off like kids did years ago with baseball cards or whatever, 2 for 1 and bargain and things like that. Okay, you could do this all year long. You could have a different story every week to connect with somebody. So, anyway, I would like to now invite the gifts to be given and the words to be shared. And the words that you're going to hear were collected, crafted by me, and we've recruited 6 readers. And they're just words, and they're going to read them while the scrolls are being distributed. And it's my hope that when you hear these diverse words, that you're going to hear a few that are going to what? They're going to call for stories from deep inside of you. And you're going to say, "Oh my God." And a story's going to come rolling into your head, into your wherever, consciousness or whatever. And I hope that you will consider going home and writing a 1-page story based on that one or two words that you have heard. And maybe if you do that, maybe you will share that written story with somebody who loves you, or maybe bring it back and share it with somebody here. Anyway, that's my big pitch for stories, because I think it is so very important. So now we'll hear the words, and we'll have the scrolls, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much, readers.
I am acquainted with being a friend. I am acquainted with the meaning of neighbor. I am acquainted with shame.
I am acquainted with inclusion. I am acquainted with oppression. I am acquainted with integrity.
I am acquainted with reconciliation. I am acquainted with pride. I am acquainted with thanksgiving.
I am acquainted with justice. I am acquainted with anger. I am acquainted with love.
I am acquainted with playfulness. I am acquainted with loneliness. I am acquainted with generosity.
I am acquainted with wholeness. I am acquainted with meanness. I am acquainted with empathy.
I am acquainted with awe and wonder. I'm acquainted with injustice. I am acquainted with blessings.
I am acquainted with laughter. I am acquainted with marginalization. I am acquainted with humility.
I am acquainted with discrimination. I am acquainted with timidity. I am acquainted with boldness.
I am acquainted with mercy. I am acquainted with depression. I am acquainted with joy.
I am acquainted with acceptance. I am acquainted with loss. I'm acquainted with imagination.
I am acquainted with courage. I am acquainted with regret. I am acquainted with gratitude.
Thank you, all the readers.
Thank you. As we pause for a moment of silence to reflect on the experience of the morning, especially the invitations to share with others the stories out of your life experiences, I invite you just to sit with the experience that you have had this morning. We see the beautiful colors of the rainbow as the light passes through a prism, depending on where we stand. But we come to see the beauty and the depths of each other by the stories that are shared. May we discover the power of our stories to bless, to affirm, to connect, to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to make stronger the human bonds of community and commitment to love and justice. We'll now have the closing hymn. Thank you.
Join me in thanking Rhett. So fantastic to have you here. As well, Shauna McLeod, so glad to have you today. So great. Our final hymn this morning is Big Singing. It's the Fire of Commitment. Please rise in body or in spirit. It's in 5/4, but you don't care. From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits to the faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living brings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
I invite you now to join hands for the benediction, if you will, please. May we learn yet again that our stories, the joyful ones and the painful ones, can be sources of sustenance and strength to persevere and prevail, and to know that we're not alone on our human journey. Amen. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
I don't know, man. I think thank you went very good here. So, oh, that's what time is it? You don't know. 11:07. But you know they have a 2-hour limit. Yeah. And if they don't finish the race in 2 hours, they quit wherever they are because they got to go party. No, I'm telling you, man. You know, like the Daytona 500, they raised 500 miles, but it takes them 3 weeks to do it, right? I'm going to run. And then it's supposed to be a 50-lap race, but if we can't get it done in 2 hours, we stop it wherever we are. And whoever in the lead wins, because we got to go party. Yeah.
Yeah. I want the minimum I can use. No, I want to get the 400 people. We just want to start at the beginning.
And I have to thank you, by the way, because I've never seen him so enthusiastic about coming to church. He's so excited about being here and being on the AV team with you guys. So
All right, well,
okay.
it doesn't take an hour to get to lunch.
You go around to 85.
That seems excessive. Alright. So this is the announcement songs, which will continue to run until the beginning of party. And then you hit escape probably twice. And then the video will be up, but it'll be on this monitor, not that monitor. Let's go ahead and switch all the inputs to input 1, all the outputs to input 1. So that video will be on this monitor. You don't have to drag it to the other monitor. I'll tell you what. Are you willing to hang out for 20 minutes? Okay. I'll step here and start it, and then I'll leave you in front of you.
Not a problem.
We had an email thread this week, and the scheduling spreadsheet has gotten more complicated. Well, you could make it bigger, but then it falls off the sides here. Let's make it bigger and drag this. So we have a column for each job, and then we have people who aren't going to be in town on that day. And then we have, do we think we have everything we need to go? And then there's comments, and then who are we supposed to be talking to get this done? This is Google Sheets. So it's just a web browser.
Are you busy for the next 5 minutes?
No.
Well, I can tell you about what I want to talk to you about.
Okay.
The first is, you probably didn't see it, but the secretary sent out an email this morning. Oh, no, you didn't see it, because it was to me. She's trying to get ready to announce what's her name? It's the secretary.
Yes, her.
And she's trying to get that email ready to go out. Only it didn't sound like she was trying to get it email. She's trying to do this. Or not. Minutes for election. And asking me all sorts of questions. And she was saying that, the website says that this year is going to be a reunion, not a big reunion. And I said, okay, well, I'll check it out. But then she went into
It was a competitor to Facebook. It's gone. I removed the links.